The Panzer III Ausf E marked a crucial turning point in the evolution of the Panzer III series, streamlining its design and setting the standard for future variants. One of its most notable improvements was the adoption of a more robust suspension system, which significantly enhanced the tank's mobility and reliability. Additionally, the standardization of its armored hull and overall construction laid the groundwork for mass production. Despite these advancements, the Panzer III Ausf E was built in relatively limited numbers. However, its design was so effective that the subsequent Panzer III Ausf.F remained almost identical aside from minor refinements. This allowed for a smoother transition into large-scale production, with over 400 units of the Ausf.F eventually being produced. As the Second World War broke out in Europe in 1939, German panzer divisions had to rely primarily on older Panzer I and Panzer II models. While the Panzer III and Panzer IV were intended to become the backbone of these divisions, production limitations made this little more than wishful thinking. It would take some time before the production numbers of the much-needed Panzer III series began to increase. The first variant to receive a larger production order was the Panzer III Ausf.F. The German Army commissioned the construction of 435 of these vehicles. To achieve this goal, 6 different companies were selected for assembly. Production quotas varied significantly due to the differing manufacturing capacities of each company. The orders were distributed as follows. Henschel received the largest order with 120 vehicles, followed by MAN with 96, Daimler-Benz with 95, MIAG with 60, Alket with 36, and finally FAMO with 28. From the outset, the production of the tank faced significant setbacks, primarily due to delays in the delivery of parts and components. As a result, Henschel was unable to deliver its first vehicle until August 1939, well past the original deadline of April 1939. To compensate for the delay, Henschel agreed to assist Daimler-Benz in meeting its production quota. Of the 95 vehicles assigned to Daimler-Benz, Henschel completed approximately 50 chassis, while the remaining 45 vehicles were assembled by Daimler-Benz between November 1939 and July 1940. Production rates remained low, averaging only 5 to 6 vehicles per month. Surviving records indicate that Henschel delivered its first vehicles in January 1940, though the exact date of the full order's completion remains unclear. MIAG's production spanned from September 1939 to June 1940, while MAN and Alket began manufacturing around September 1939 and continued until May 1941. Unfortunately, FAMO's production records did not survive the war. The hull of this vehicle was divided into 3 sections. The forward compartment housed the transmission and steering systems, the central compartment accommodated the crew, and the rear compartment contained the engine. Armored ventilation ports for the steering brakes were integrated into the frontal glacis armor plate. While this might seem like an easy way to distinguish it from its predecessor, this was not always the case. Some Ausf E models were also equipped with these ports, while certain Ausf.F variants lacked them. This Panzer III variant featured a 6-road wheel torsion bar suspension system. Although the suspension design remained largely unchanged, the original 75mm wide rubber rims on the road wheels were prone to rapid wear. To address this issue, their width was increased to 95mm, extending their service life. Another modification involved repositioning the front return roller slightly forward to prevent the track from striking the front-mounted shock absorber, a common issue in earlier models. The tank was powered by the Maybach HL120TR, which produced 265 horsepower at 2800 RPM. The only noticeable difference from the previous version was the inclusion of a slightly improved electric starter and modified ventilation ports. However, these changes had no significant impact on overall performance, with the vehicle maintaining a maximum speed of 40 km per hour. The engine was paired with a Maybach Variotex SRG semi-automatic transmission, which proved mechanically unreliable and prone to frequent breakdowns. Despite efforts to improve its performance, the issues persisted, ultimately leading to its replacement with the older, more reliable, and thoroughly tested SSG-76 transmission in the Panzer III Ausf H. The superstructure remained largely unchanged from its predecessor. The only modification was the addition of 3-part deflectors designed to protect the small gap where the hole connected with the turret. Most Panzer III Ausf.F tanks were produced without the left side fake periscope cover on top of the turret. Additionally, a dedicated ventilation port was installed on the turret roof, protected by a round-shaped cover. From April 1941 onward, all Panzer III tanks were equipped with a rear-mounted turret storage bin. The armor protection remained unchanged from the previous version, with 30mm thick plating on the front and sides. The rear sections were slightly less protected, featuring 20mm of armor. However, combat experience quickly revealed that even this level of protection was insufficient. Switching to thicker 50mm armor plates would have caused significant production delays, so a more practical solution was adopted. Instead, additional 30mm face-hardened plates were either welded or bolted onto the front and rear of the vehicle to enhance its protection. All tanks would be produced with the main armament consisting of a 3.7cm KWK-36 gun, supported by 3 7.92mm MG-34 machine guns, with one mounted in the superstructure and 2 in the turret. On the Panzer III Ausf.F, the machine gun's drum-fed magazines were replaced with belt-fed systems, each holding 150 rounds. A total of 30 belts were stored inside the vehicle, providing an overall ammunition capacity of 4,500 rounds. German Army officials foresaw the need to improve the Panzer's anti-tank capabilities, and many advocated for the adoption of a more powerful 5cm gun. However, some within the Army, including the Inspector of Artillery, who was responsible for the development of tank and anti-tank weaponry, insisted on retaining the 3.7cm caliber. The primary reason for this decision was an attempt to standardize ammunition between infantry and tank guns. While they did agree that a longer-barreled 3.7cm gun should be developed, these efforts ultimately led nowhere. Development priorities soon shifted toward the more effective 5cm caliber instead. The perceived effectiveness of the 3.7cm gun was further distorted when the Germans conducted firing tests on a captured Polish Renault R-35 tank. Originally purchased from France, this vehicle arrived in Poland too late to influence the September 1939 conflict with Germany. In December 1939, the High Command of the 11th Army Corps issued a report on the results of these tests, contributing to the ongoing assessment of German anti-tank capabilities. Ballistic tests on a captured French R-35 have shown that it is easily penetrated by our anti-tank weapons despite having 40mm thick armor. This result is mainly due to the fact that the superstructure and turret are made of cast steel. Only the side parts of the hull are made of rolled steel. The R-35 is penetrated by the 3.7cm anti-tank round at an angle of impact of 60 degrees, from the front at 600 meters, at the turret, and from the side at 350 meters. Experience gained during the battles in France quickly revealed that the 3.7cm gun was inadequate against modern tank designs. Following the campaigns in May 1940, extensive efforts were made to introduce a more powerful 5cm gun as soon as possible. Prior to the war, Rheinmetall Borsig had already been developing such a weapon, which eventually led to the creation of the 5cm Pak-38 anti-tank gun. The next step was adapting it for tank use. However, bureaucratic delays and concerns that the long barrel might be vulnerable to damage in forested or urban environments led to the adoption of a shorter variant instead. As a result, Krupp developed the short 5cm KWK L42 semi-automatic gun, which would be refitted to many of the Panzer IIIs after the Western campaign. With a standard armor-piercing round, the 5cm L42 could penetrate 47mm of armor at a range of 500 meters. The installation of this new weapon reduced the tank's ammunition capacity from 120 to 87 rounds and necessitated the removal of one of the machine guns from the turret. To compensate for the additional weight, stronger torsion bars were introduced, along with wider 40cm tracks. Despite these modifications, the Panzer III Ausf.F retained its original 5-man crew, consisting of the commander, gunner, loader, driver, and radio operator. The increased production of the Panzer III meant that approximately 349 vehicles of all types were available for the German advance against the Western Allies in May 1940. These tanks were distributed among 7 different panzer divisions, with an average of 50 per division. By this time, most of the available Panzer IIIs were of the new Ausf.F variant. The Panzer III Ausf.F saw its first combat during the fighting near the village of Hanut in Belgium on May 12, 1940. In this engagement, Panzer IIIs successfully destroyed 8 Hotchkiss tanks. Due to poor visibility from their tanks, the French failed to spot the advancing German forces in time. Despite this success, German gunners quickly realized that their 3.7 cm guns weren't cut out for the job. Engaging tanks like the Samu S-35 and the D-2 effectively required closing to within 300 meters. While against the larger and better armored B-1Bs, the Panzer III's guns were nearly useless. For example, during an engagement at Mortier, France, German forces attempted to destroy a B-1 tank. After numerous failed attempts, 3 Panzer IIIs had to flank the vehicle from behind. One fired over 10 rounds, but inflicted no significant damage. The other 2 attempted to disable its turret. Eventually, the French crew abandoned the tank, but despite being hit multiple times, the B-1 remained largely intact. Only a single round managed to penetrate its rear armor and disable the engine. Total Panzer III losses for the campaign were 133 vehicles. The combat experience in the West showed that both the Panzer III's 3.7 cm gun and armor left a lot to be desired. While the best French tanks had superior firepower and armor, they were clearly outdated in other aspects. The Panzer III's 5-man crew proved far more effective than the French tank's 2- or 3-man crews. In most French designs, the commander was burdened with multiple roles: loading and firing the gun, locating targets, and directing the vehicle, severely limiting combat effectiveness. German tanks, by contrast, benefited from better coordination, speed, training, and the use of radios, allowing them to outmaneuver and engage enemy tanks from advantageous positions. After the French campaign, the Germans sought to address the Panzer III's shortcomings by rearming many with the 5 cm L-42 gun and adding 30 mm of extra frontal and rear armor. Following the conclusion of the Western campaign, the Germans shifted their focus to the Balkans. In this theater of war, they deployed over 270 Panzer III tanks, including approximately 109 armed with 3.7 cm guns. Both Greece and Yugoslavia had limited armored forces, making tank versus tank battles rare. Even the British forces stationed in Greece had only a small number of tanks. Despite this, the Germans still lost 31 Panzer III tanks, which had to be written off. The Panzer III Ausf.F saw combat during the North African campaign, where the extreme heat and harsh desert conditions posed significant challenges for both the tank crews and the vehicle's mechanical systems. To mitigate these issues, several modifications were made to its engine compartment and ventilation system. Ventilation holes were cut into the engine compartment armor and covered with armored caps to protect the engine from damage. Additionally, extra air filters were installed to prevent dust and sand from clogging the engine. In March 1941, Germany deployed its forces to Tripoli to support its beleaguered Italian ally. Among these reinforcements was the 5th Panzer Regiment, equipped with 71 Panzer IIIs armed with 5 cm guns. By May, the German armored presence was further strengthened with the arrival of the 15th Panzer Division, which also fielded 71 Panzer IIIs. The most prevalent variants in North Africa were the later Panzer III Ausf G and H models, though at least a few Panzer III Ausf Fs also saw service in the campaign. During the invasion of the Soviet Union, the Panzer III served as the backbone of the German armored assault. The German tanks quickly overran older Soviet models like the T-26 and the BT series. However, the T-34 and KV tanks once again proved challenging to German tank guns. While the 5 cm short-barreled gun struggled, the 3.7 cm gun was virtually useless against these Soviet vehicles. This is highlighted in a battle report from the 3rd Panzer Division. The I-Abteilung destroyed 3 tanks with Christie-type suspension on 19th of August. Clear penetrations were achieved using Panzergranate 40 only at favorable angles and at ranges below 400 meters, and only on weak points such as the gun mantlet or the hull sides. Binocular observation revealed that direct hits by Panzergranate 40 on the turret resulted in ricochets, even at ranges under 400 meters. Direct fire at the tracks resulted in clear penetrations. The mounting losses on the Eastern Front meant that the majority of the Panzer III Ausf.F tanks were lost by the end of 1941, with many being replaced by newer variants. However, few of these tanks survived and continued to be used for some time afterward. This concludes our 6th video of our Panzer III series. What do you think of the Panzer III Ausf E clone? Would you be interested in seeing more variants of the Panzer III in future videos? Share your opinions in the comments section below. If you haven't done so already, we invite you to subscribe to stay updated on future content. If you'd like to contribute further, consider supporting us on Patreon or PayPal. We want to especially thank our medium and heavy tank Patreon supporters: Alex Harvey, Dan Fitzpatrick, Dave Schuford, Leslie Holkauer, Michael Herman, Owen M., Peter Bradbury, and Wolfhund. Your generous contributions help fund our research, illustrations, and video production. Until next time, keep us in your sights.